Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to a new session of our Sunday English speaking series, powered by Shubh Language Academy Jaipur. And this time we are fortunate to have with us Ms. Cécilia Papadimopoulos. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and to be a part of this exchange today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. To talk a little bit about our expert for the day, ma'am, after a bachelor's degree at the Sorbonne University in Paris, focused on English, civilization, and linguistics, ma'am trained for 2 years in pedagogy and teaching techniques to broaden her teaching abilities at the IUFM, which is Institut de Formation des Maîtres. In English, it is an institute for the teachers training in Paris. She then decided to return to the Sorbonne to complete a master's degree in English literature specialized in the Victorian period. She has been teaching English for almost 2 decades now, as you can understand, even through her video that she had shared across. She decided to follow one of her passions 8 years ago and became a state licensed tourist guide in France with classes from the Louvre Museum. Passionate with Asian culture and in particular with the Indian subcontinent, she started learning Hindi as well. Today, she also accompanies groups of French travelers to India occasionally to share her unbounded love for this multicolor country that is India. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are so thrilled to see your love and affection for our country, India, and especially with Hindi language as well. I hope that we get to listen some Hindi from you during the course of this little span that we would spend with you. So everyone, please join me in welcoming ma'am. And I also welcome all the participants because they have been our strength and support because every time they're there, whenever we have any expert who comes in and joins us, and they are always eager to listen from that expert and to share their experiences and to get to know from the expert as well. So without further ado, I would request ma'am to talk about herself a little bit, and then we'll get the session going on.
Sure, with pleasure. So, namaste to you all. Thank you very, very much for having me today. I'm quite glad to be able to join this project that Jay is organizing right here. So, I am French. I was born just outside of Paris. So, right now we are just outside of Paris. And yes, it is 10 a.m. in the morning. It's a little earlier. I'm very happy to be able to join you because it's always difficult to find time with the time changes. So I'm really, really glad we're able to do this today. So I started learning English at school. In France, when I was younger, we only started at a certain age, like 11 years old, which is in the end quite late. I see that there are indeed some young learners. And I think it is amazing that you are, yes, yeah. I think it's amazing that you are already so committed to learning because I had to actually learn on my own at first to be able to get to where I am today. When I was little, so it was started 11 years old, and then English would be your second language. Obviously, my first language is French, and I pushed through into more dedicated studies of linguistics, as you were saying, and so a lot of grammar, basically, and civilization of the English-speaking world. Through the Sorbonne University, which is a very, very old university from the Middle Ages, although the teachers are not from the Middle Ages, they're a little younger than that. I did have my 3 years of bachelor there where we dove really into the specifics of the language and also learning the etymology of everything. And then indeed, I wanted to be a teacher, and I was already giving English courses from then, and later on, I decided to go back to the Sorbonne University and specialize in Victorian literature, so the grand era of English literature. And I've taught English all through, so yeah, for 19 years because I started rather early. So I've been teaching whether kids or adults for a very, very long time. And yeah, a few years ago, I started also organizing tours. So I'm a tour guide in Paris. And I'm lucky enough to actually, because I tour in English, to have quite a few people coming from India coming to the main sites in Paris, and I get to speak a bit of my Hindi with them a little bit, and to share a lot of the history of my country here in Paris with Indians coming to visit.
True. Such a beautiful journey that you have traveled in terms of English being one of the most important pillar of this whole journey, and then of course how you got in touch with the other aspects of this language as well. We also would like to talk a little bit about the challenges, ma'am, if at all you faced or while you were a student yourself and you were in the bachelor's part of it or doing the master's part of it. Were there any challenges that you faced as a learner for this language, and how did you cope with that, if at all you had any?
So indeed, and really, when you get the basis at school, you actually only get, and that's what you're doing as well. I think in India, when you have your training, when you get the basis, you don't actually learn how to get around so much. You're going to learn the vocabulary that's really just what you're going to find in books. So even going through a master's degree from a very good university, I think learning on the side and learning within the actual everyday life was something even more important than going through a very serious education through school. Because, at university, I was studying Shakespeare. I could read every single sonnet and tell you everything. But in terms of daily vocabulary, that was so... You're so cute. I'm sorry. You're adorable. In terms of daily vocabulary, it was extremely difficult. And in the end, it's really immersing yourself and using that daily vocabulary that is very helpful. When I was young, I really started learning. I'm going to be very honest with you. Despite the Sorbonne being an incredible journey, I learned English with the Spice Girls. Some of you might be a little young to know, but it's a band, an English band. I think music was extremely helpful through that journey. Today, there are so many different places where you can get influence from, whether it's like Netflix or so on. You have so many tools that you can be using to broaden your language, of course. So education is a very, very important part, but I would say it's important that you don't limit yourself to that. In terms of difficulty, I would say, and that is something that's that could be also relevant for someone in India, it's the stress in the language. English, like if I compare this to French, although in Hindi you do have the stress as well, English is a very tonic language with lots of stresses on the different parts of the word. And if you do not master that, I think it's very difficult to be understood. For example, if I use one word in Hindi, if I use the word acha, you have the stress on the second syllable. You go acha, like on the second one, right? If I said acha, I would have it on the first syllable, which doesn't quite sound exactly the same. And this in French does not exist. In French, you do not have stress on words. The stress is always on the first syllable. When if you learn English, it can be sometimes on the first syllable, sometimes on the penultimate one, which is the last to previous one. You have so many different places. I would say one of the challenges as a French speaker was where to find how to position your stress in a word. That can be very stressful when you think about it. And I think this is something very important. So what I would do, we would have very complex phonetic classes where you would learn the phonetic alphabets, which is, it's a journey in itself. But I would say if I could go back in time myself, I would just get myself a dictionary right away and look at every single word, because you do have that little accent written close to the word, and that's going to be super helpful, in terms of practicing and knowing where to put that stress. Also, one of the challenges And I do believe that's something that you would find as a Hindi speaker as well, is neutral nouns and objects in English. In Hindi, to be honest, I am finding it very difficult to remember if kursi is feminine or masculine, if darwaza is feminine or masculine. It is very complicated because, of course, those are objects. And the same thing happens in French. A table in French is feminine. But of course, there's no way for you to know that. You just have to know. And the fact that in English, objects are neutral does make it easier somehow, but at the same time, it makes it more complicated because your brain is kind of stuck on this gender thing. So you will hear a lot of French people, when we speak English, if we say, okay, did you set the table? Oh yes, she's set. When it makes no sense in English. But those are some of the challenges that us French speakers can have to face. And I do believe those are things that you can maybe relate to as an Indian speaker, because that's the trouble I'm having when I'm learning Hindi.
True, absolutely. I think very beautifully you have put out, Cecilia ma'am, the challenges that you faced. And if today you are an expert for us, that means you have traveled the journey of all ups and downs. And I think we can very easily relate ourselves to you and your journey as well, so that every learner who feels that it's going to be a tough journey, then believe me, as what ma'am rightly mentioned, don't give up, just keep on practicing, work very hard towards it. And the way you can actually immerse yourself in the whole system, the way ma'am did during her time, was maybe Spice Girls, the musical band that she had for herself. You could also create something of your own in an artificial way, which helps you to soak yourself into the culture, language, and the social part of it, so as to enhance your language skills. So I think that makes a lot of sense. If you could, ma'am, just put across some other strategies that you used to use at that point of time, and because later on we'd also ask you some new strategies that we can have for our learners now. But maybe during your time, what was the approach like? How would you go about it? How would you do things at your time? Going to the library, or maybe reading a lot of books? How was it?
Yeah, of course, you have so many tools that you can be using. In terms of books, of course, I'm in that generation where the Harry Potter series, is coming out. So I was reading all these books, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to wait for the French translation. I'm just going to start reading it in English. So I would be reading, and it doesn't actually matter. Honestly, I would understand 2 words out of 5, but it doesn't really matter. What matters in the first place, I think, Jay, you might agree with me on that, is that you're going to capture the whole idea of a sentence. It's all right if you do have some difficulties into understanding each and every word. You should never just focus on one word and being blocked by it. What you want is the general idea. So I would say, even if reading is challenging, you still want to go through. Maybe you just choose different, different levels of books. You can go towards something very, very easy. Among the readings that I give to my pupils, to my younger pupils, we're going to have all these readings from the fantasy world, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and things like this that are actually fun to read. And that if you want to understand more of the specifics, you can even just watch the movies that were made about it, and just try to get capture the idea, and also try to listen to it as much as possible. Listen, because your brains, and whatever your age, actually, it works even better when you're young, but your brains are like sponges. And the more you hear people talk, the more you're going to capture that accent as well, and that fluidity. Even if you think you don't speak English, maybe you're going to hear someone say something and you're going to go, ooh, that did not sound good. Like, you don't know what is wrong about it, but your brain was able to determine that did not sound like it was supposed to, because you will capture that vibration of sentences and of sounds. And that's actually extremely important, and that does help you quite a bit. So reading, of course, listening. So of course now you have Netflix, which is something that you can very much rely on, because that's extremely helpful. Sometimes they do make mistakes. Sometimes they do, grammatically speaking, the language you speak and the language you write can be sometimes different. We tend not to always respect the tenses and so on when we speak. But it's okay. It doesn't matter. What you want is to capture this fluidity, and you will have time to practice and to improve even afterwards. And there's one thing that I was doing when I was young, and it might sound very silly, but I do believe it helps. In English, there's a saying, it's fake it until you make it. Just pretend. Just put on the most ridiculous accent you can. Just go blah, 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 like with a stupid accent. And actually, the more you're going to do it, and the more you're going to be able to capture where the sound comes from. Because depending on where you're from, the sound doesn't come from the same place. In French, we have a very nasal sound. And in Hindi as well, because there are some sounds like nahi, like those are difficult sounds for us to get. But the English language is more located towards the back of your throat. And even just those sounds with the TH and the tongue sticking. So for example, if you're having difficulties pronouncing the, because you do have to put your tongue, in between your teeth. Just stick your tongue out like crazy, go the, if that helps, because overdoing it is actually going to give you the keys to mastering it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you've already delved into the aspects that we were trying to take up for as tips that could be put across. So thank you so much, and that really helps us a lot, because something that you very interestingly said, Cecilia ma'am, was about shadowing. I mean, the way that you can actually imitate the native speaker, and that helps you to really near yourself to the right pronunciation. As again, every time I say, we are not being judgmental about the fact the way we speak. It's just one's intention to really near oneself to the pronunciation of a native person, perhaps. So for that, if you can watch videos, one can watch videos and see how the native people do. That really helps a lot, which you rightly mentioned, as to where one has to speak from, what is the right kind of formation of the mouth that has to be done, where the tongue has to be kept. All these little things do play a major role in bringing out the right sound. And at the same time, when you rightly mentioned about overdoing it, I think overdoing has a very negative connotation in the society, that, don't overdo. But I think in terms of language learning, one has to overdo and then has to get it to the right shape. Because it's just like, I was talking the other day to someone, I was telling that it's just like a potter's wheel, wherein he puts all the clay together in a shapeless way, and then he gives a shape to it. I think it's the same manner wherein we overdo certain things and then we give them shape. In terms of the pronunciation part of it, it can be a writing part as well. So it depends as to how we do it, but overdoing in a very sensible way. But of course, you have to start doing it. It can be overdone, it can be underdone, but slowly and gradually it gets into the right shape. I think that was very nicely said. Thank you. And the fact that you said you would always latch on to the English versions of the storybooks, which really interested you. I think that's also an interesting point, because if something that interests you as a hobby, maybe taking up yoga, taking up some storybooks that have always fascinated you, if you go through their original version, which in the cases of English, then it really helps you. The way ma'am said, she would pick just 2 words out of those 5 words, but that did not let her interest go down, and she just kept on learning and learning and learning. So I think that was very interestingly and very fascinatingly said, Cecilia ma'am. I think that was a great motivation for all our learners, and I'm sure that would help us to take a leap in our English language journey. Thank you. Moving ahead, I think we would like to talk a lot about your Indian connection and the love that you have for India. So could you talk a little bit, Cecilia ma'am, as to how this all started, and how did you fall in love with India? And then till this point, how have you traveled this whole journey of this Franco-Indian kind of connection?
Yeah. So the first time I visited India was in 2017. So it was actually not so long ago when you think about it, but I've come so many times that over that period that it does feel like it was a while ago as well. I think I don't know if you want to talk about this afterwards or if you want me to mingle in this right now, but there's a lot of prejudice towards India. Is it okay if
Yeah,
I
please,
jump?
please carry on. No, absolutely, absolutely. Please carry on, ma'am.
You
Yeah.
tell me. Unfortunately, there is a lot of prejudice towards India because that is a country that we don't know very well. France and Europe in general has a very heavy historical background. So when we have our history classes, we're going to mostly focus on this throughout school. So we don't have that much space for world history. And when I came to India, I must confess I was rather ignorant of what India would be. You know, we all go, we say, okay, we're going to go to the Taj Mahal, and we don't even realize what is beyond this, because the Taj Mahal is just a small piece in terms of what you can find in India. And lots of people are going to be, they're not going to have that curiosity of looking, you know, beyond what is said and what we have learned. And the first time I went, I'm not going to say I went reluctantly, but I came with prejudice, for sure. And from the moment I stepped out of the airport in Delhi, they all just flew away, because I was completely struck by how kind, welcoming people were, how colorful, how multicultural, how dense, and it's just such a swirl of emotions when you arrive in India. Some people actually have difficulties because it's so much. You get hit. It's the of course the cultural background is entirely different, and sometimes it's just a surge of emotion that is difficult to be able to face it, and it takes several days for people to adjust. It takes maybe 3-4 days for people to adjust, and then people don't want to leave. The first time I went there, I went through Rajasthan. I went to Jaipur, which was just absolutely fantastic. I've been there many times ever since. But I went to Pushkar. I went to a lot of different cities. I went to Varanasi, and seeing, I must say, seeing the faith of people, going to Pushkar, going to the secret lake. I mean, this was such an incredible discovery to see how fervent people can be, and how I just loved witnessing this, how united people can be. And we have so much to learn and so much to take from you guys. And then I've been able to travel through the country. Last January, I was in Karnataka, I was in Tamil Nadu. I've been to the center, rather center states. I've been to Bhopal, I've been to Indore. I've been to so many different places. And I think every state has such a background, that's such a history to itself. It's a new discovery. There's always something to do in India, and that's among the things that I just love so much. And I decided to share this passion I've had for India for a few years by taking people with me. And you know, it is a journey in itself, because you're going to talk to people who have this media view, which is rather negative, unfortunately. And say, okay, don't you worry, come with me. You will see. And all the people have taken with me so far, they've all told me, we're coming back. We're going to come back. Whenever we can, we're coming back. Because they received such an incredible welcome. And they were like, oh, wait, this is what it is. And of course, they're amazed at the palaces. You go to Bikaner, you visit the palaces. Of course, you go to the Amber Fort, but on top of that, we go to see the puja. We go to eat. We go to eat Italian, and they're completely in love with the country. There's not a single person that I've taken with me to India that said, "Nah, it's okay." No, they all want to come back, and I think you should be so proud in your culture, because we have a lot to learn, and you are willing to share. And this is rather unique. I can tell you, I've traveled a little bit. This is rather unique. So that's why I've tried to take up a little bit of Hindi with a fantastic teacher who's very patient.
And I think you have been wonderful at the same time to have jumped into this ocean of learning Hindi through the Indian culture as well. But I think here, very interestingly, have put a point that it's too heavy as a country to be taken up at the first go. So when you talk about the French people or the foreigners who want to visit India, they are taken aback at times. Would they really want to make that step to come to India or not? I think you are a great helping hand in that sense, Cecilia, ma'am, because you are trying to break those stereotypes for people that no, it's not unsafe. It's a dense country, it's intense country, it's full of emotions, it's full of colors. But I'm sure they feel that they would be just blown away, they'll be carried away. They need some hand holding, and I think someone
Yeah.
like you who is from their country can really handhold them. And once they are here, they can get drenched into this beauty of the whole country. I think you do it beautifully, so thank you for being such a beautiful ambassador for India and France. I think you're doing a wonderful job by fostering these Indo-French cultural relations, so thank you so much for that as well. And so I think we have traveled with your words that how French people see our country. At distance, they see it in a different way, but when they come into it, it's altogether a different experience that they feel for themselves. All thanks to you. And we'd like to listen a little bit about your Hindi journey. If you could speak few words to us in Hindi, I'm sure our participants would be thrilled to listen from your side. Some Hindi words, some Hindi expressions, or maybe some sentences for that matter.
Sure. Well, I have a terrible accent, though.
No, no, please go ahead. We'd love to listen to you.
Well, well, now I'm going to be blushing. Well, I can say आपसे मिलकर खुशी हुई. मेरा नाम
Please.
सेसिलिया है. मैं फ्रांस से हूँ. I can say, there is one that I use in the Louvre. Okay, when I do tours in the Louvre and I'm lucky enough, and then people look at me. I told you about this, Jeff, the other day. People look at me like, this blonde girl speaks Hindi. Because we have, okay, I get into this room in the Louvre Museum and I say, हमारे पास एक diamond है. ये diamond भारत से है. ये diamond 140 carat hai. And like, oh,
wonderful.
And I look at them and Jay, you taught me something specific. They go, oh, bahut acha hai. You speak Hindi. And I say, oh, are kaha.
Yeah, I'm sure Are kaha, that's you can be absolutely modest by saying no. That's just the basic that I'm learning. So I mean, you have learned it well, and you know how to use it. That's again a very interesting cultural aspect that you've picked up. So
and
that
it's
was
very
great.
convenient when I walk on the streets. Actually, when I walk in the streets in India, which is not something you do. I noticed, we're talking about the differences together as well between France and India. In France, we walk a lot, just for the sake of walking. And in India, whenever I walk in the streets, everybody's asking me, oh, do you need a ride? Where are you going to? I'm going nowhere. I'm just walking around, which is not as frequent. But so, of course, there are lots of tuk-tuk drivers that offer to take me, and they say, okay, we'll take you for, they speak English to me, you say, we'll take you for 200 rupee. And I look at them and I go, बहुत ज़्यादा है, किराया कम कीजिए. And
Oh, that's great. I'm sure they would be like astonished. They would never expect this kind of an expression from a French girl, right? So that's great. I mean, all those quick expressions that you can actually dash in to sort of confuse, to put people at some chance. Yeah.
It's really just to be fun. It's really just to try to interact,
True.
because I always intend to be respectful. I'm trying, because we don't have necessarily the same standards, like the app or TUM questioning can be very, very difficult as well. So I'm always trying to be respectful. I do hope I'm never disrespectful to anyone, but I'm trying to work my way through it. And it is, and when I go to India, I go to the Raj Mandir very often to try to learn more of the.
So I think Bollywood has played a very big role in your Hindi learning strategies as well.
You see, that's why I'm telling you. Also, like movies and Netflix and so on, I'm using this even nowadays to help me with my Hindi. So you should really do that with your English. That's going to be very helpful.
Absolutely. I think that really makes sense that, if you can soak yourself in the culture by being in the country, nothing like that. But of course, that's not possible for everyone every time because of certain situations. So I think a natural situation can be replicated in a way that an artificial one can be created, and you can soak yourself by movies, by interaction with people across the countries through internet. So I think all is possible. So that's great. Also, Cecilia, ma'am, we would like to listen from your side because, in India, we speak English, right? And you have heard many Indians speak English, and you have had your experience of soaking yourself in the British and American atmospheres as well. So, how do you see the Indian English coming up your way, and what do you have to say for the Indian people when they speak English? Do you again, I always put it across because everyone has his own her own way to express in English. But if
Absolutely.
from your side, we can have some kind of input as to what differences do you observe, and if there's some suggestions that you could put across and let us know how do we speak, and if there are any some points that we can take up from your side, please.
Yes, it is sometimes. I've traveled to England, to America, and to India, and of course, the accent is going to be different because it depends a lot on your what we're saying, your ability to locate your voice in your different parts of your mouth. That's going to be a very very big input on your pronunciation, and of course each place has an accent. In France, we do have different accents, whether we come from the north or from the south. In America, you have a different accent, whether you're from Texas or New York. So in India, as well, people have their own accent. I have it. Sometimes I do struggle because I have a tendency, in particular with my work, to speak very fast and with a rather Northern American accent because that's the clientele I'm getting more than anyone. And so going to India, sometimes I'm struggling a lot into being understood because I speak very fast with my own accent. Although when Indian people speak back to me, it's extremely fluid and very easy to understand. Like this is quite interesting. In some places where I go in America, or let's say even closer to in Europe, if I go to Ireland, the accent is so strong that even with my 20 plus years experience in speaking English, I have difficulties understanding. When in India, the accent is actually, it's an Indian accent, obviously, but it's so easy to understand. I think that's quite interesting that like such a diversity of languages can be found within the same of accent within the same language. Yeah, one thing that I've noticed is, and that's a struggle when I'm learning Hindi, and I think that's a struggle when you're trying to learn English as well, is articles. That's what I was mentioning to you earlier, Jay. In French, in English, in Latin languages as well, we use articles all the time. We say a chair, or like not even just for counting. We use the articles all the time, the book, and so on. In Hindi, you don't use articles. And this, when I'm learning Hindi, I'm always like, oh God, what is the article? Oh no, there is none. Okay. But so when you're speaking English in India, I've noticed that you do not necessarily use these articles. Like, since you're used to not having them in Hindi, you're not going to translate them in English. And that is very specific in India. That is not something I've heard anywhere else. So I think that's really the Indian background jumping in here. So this, of course, you do have this sometimes this feminine masculine thing also, as the French do. But yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise, it's very very easy to understand people speaking English in
True.
India. That's actually quite
Yeah.
good.
No, I think that's very correct what you say, that we speak in a very academic way. So it's very structured, it's simple, it's easy. We learn it and then we express ourselves. And then after a certain time, we start to pick up accents from other countries as well, whatever suits us the best, whatever kind of work we are doing. So accordingly, we move ahead. So I think the base stays very raw. It's very clean, very clear, very structured, and then people build on that as per their own requirements. So I think that's true what you say, because many times we've seen that Indian students, they do go to France as well to teach English over there. That's in a preference that they would want Indians, because when they speak, they're very structured, they're very clean, they're very clear, and everyone can understand them. So I think that's really hand-holding as well for people who want to learn English. So I think if you have got Indian teachers who want to teach English, I think that becomes very handy for people across. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. And also, in terms of cultural shocks, I mean, I was just you were saying something, and I was nodding my head. So I instantly thought about, the Western world sees the Indian mannerisms in a different way. We do it differently. So when we nod our head, it can be this way or that way. It can be in multiple ways, and we all understand each other in the Indian community or in the Asian community for the larger perspective. But how do you see these, and how do you deal with that, Cecilia ma'am, in terms of when you're in India, and are there things that bother you in the sense that you don't understand as to what is being said, what is being communicated, in terms of cultural shocks that you had, or some some confusion that you experienced?
The nodding is very interesting. I love the nodding, and the issue is that whenever I'm coming, or French people are coming with me, when we get back, we start nodding, and no one
You pick it up.
we're mimicking, because of course, in the first place, well, in particular, I've noticed it's stronger in Kerala and South India. It's a little stronger, but yeah, there's in France. So you have two types of nodding. You're going to have this one, that's no, and this one that's yes. But we don't use it that much because we're a Latin language, so we talk more with our hands than with our head. And going to South India, that one is a yes. And you see, for example, when we get there, we see all the colors. Everything is just so gorgeous, and the women are wearing fantastic clothing, and the French, we go, oh, please, can we take a picture of you? Can we take a picture of you? And when people say this, we go, oh, okay, because we think it's a no, because that side would be no for us. So in the first place, we identify it as a no. But when people understand, of course, and just like a little, I think in northern, so in Rajasthan, for example, it's not as strong, but it's more of a like, okay, like a little tilt. And I do that when I come back home a lot. And my friends tell me, they say, you were just in India again. Yeah. And
So that's an indication. Yeah. Sorry, please carry on. Yeah, yeah.
no, but whenever I am with Indian customers, it's instinctive. I don't, and it's not at all a mocking or anything. It's just when you're soaked into a culture. First, if you want to be soaked into a culture, you have to want it. Like if you just go and you don't want to learn, then you're not learning. But myself, I want to be part of this culture. So when I get there, I'm trying to capture every single bit that will help me diving in it. And so I adopt it. It's really adopting something. And adopting the nod is something that you do automatically. And that's when you feel like, oh, I belong a little bit.
I think that's very interesting, because you have to adapt yourself to the new culture, and you do it wonderfully, because the nodding of the head is one of the indications that show that you are into the part of the culture, and even you do not seem different from us. Then you would nod the same way as we would do. So that's true, because this nodding was never an issue for us, because we never saw it from an external perspective. But when people did tell us that there's some problem going on there, because when you nod, we don't understand if it's a yes, it's a no, and we were like, no, it's always a yes, because if I'm doing this way, that means it's yes. But it was never such a case for us, because we always understood each other very nicely. But from the external point of view, that's true. It did happen to me a lot of times when people ask me, what did you say? Did you say yes or no? I said my bit, and I said yes. So, but I think that also is very cultural, Cecilia ma'am, because a very firm yes is yes. A very firm no is very much like this. It's something in between the two. So we are always, shunting between the extremities of yes and no. So that kind of culture is there, wherein you cannot be too firm to say yes, you cannot be too firm to say no either. So I think there is some story behind that. So maybe we can, move into it someday later. But I think that also paves the path for this kind of discussion. So thank you for sharing these experiences of the cultural differences that you experience. While in India, and when you go back to France, you are somewhat Indianized as well. That is what we can say. All right, great. So now I would like to open the session for our learners. Um, so in case if there are questions from our audience, if you would like to share something, your own experience, if there's something that you have felt over the years by learning English or anything you would like to put across. Yeah, Parham, you'd like to say something?
Sir, I have a question for ma'am.
Yeah, please.
That means what is the most benefit of speaking French, and means what is it like to be with culture with French?
Okay. So you're drifting your question towards the French language, is it? Okay, maybe Cecilia, ma'am, you can give a general perspective of learning French as well at the same time, but largely the session focuses on English as a language. Nevertheless, we'll take that up as well. Yeah, Cecilia, ma'am, over to you.
I say French is quite interesting in the sense that we do have. It used to be one of the most spoken languages in the world. It's not anymore, but during the high times of kings and queens, French was really the language that you were talking in all the different ports. So in many languages, you have words derived from French. So that can be very
Uh,
beneficial in that.
could I just interrupt, Cecilia, ma'am? I think there's some technical issue from your end. Could you just re-speak because we felt there's some technical. While you're speaking, it's not very clear the voice.
Okay.
Could you say something?
Yes. Is it working now? Is it okay?
No, it's not very clear.
Ma'am, it's
No,
still,
no, it's
since
still
it
not
is
clear.
breaking in between.
Yeah, it's breaking in between. Yeah, could you just retry once again?
Yes, sure. I don't even have anything.
Still, ma'am.
Stop. Oh, la, la. Um, is it okay here?
I think it still is there. What you could do is that if you could just disconnect once and rejoin, maybe that would help.
So you just refresh
Yeah,
this.
please do that. Yeah,
And you're
thank you.
right.
All right. Meanwhile, ma'am is trying to rejoin. Dear learners, I'm sure you are enjoying this session. And if at all you have any questions, please be ready with them because we'll be opening the session for everyone. And we've already opened with Parham's question that has come up. I think ma'am is there now. Yeah, ma'am, can you unmute yourself once? We'll see if it's clear to us, your voice.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
It's
Yeah,
better now?
yeah, it's absolutely okay. Please carry on, ma'am.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, so I was saying that French used to be the language spoken in court during the high times of monarchies back in the 15, 16, 1700s. Everybody spoke French actually back then. So I think there are lots of words that have derived from French, and we'll get back to this afterwards. But so in the end, there are lots of ways you can relate to the French language. Although it is true, if you want to be able to get around, travel, and interact with anyone, English, of course, is going to be the main language, and French is rather difficult. I must say, sometimes even the French don't use it well, so it's a hard language to speak. We're lucky enough. Jaivardhan is a fantastic French speaker. He speaks a better French than I do.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yes, you're a fantastic French speaker, but you more than anyone know the challenges in learning the tenses and so on. I would say, historically speaking, a language as French is very important, but today, to be very honest with you, to get around in the world, of course, English is going to be a priority. And normally in France, we all speak English, sometimes with a little bit of an accent, but we do speak English normally, so it's easier to get around, obviously.
Perfect.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Parham. If you have other questions, please feel free to ask ma'am about her experience of learning Hindi as well. If you can relate to your challenges that you face in English, maybe she could throw some light on her experiences of learning Hindi. If you have any questions, dear students, please feel free to ask them. Also, questions based on maybe the stereotypes that French people have in terms of India as a country. Anything, please feel free, because that's a session wherein we would want you all to speak, share your points across, and have a little exchange.
So, ma'am, I want to say 2 words of French. Bonjour, ma'am. Je m'appelle Parham. And nice I am. So, do you also speak French? Means, what's your experience? How did you learn? Means, what was your experience with going on with French?
Okay, so he would like to know if you speak French. So one quick response, Cécilia ma'am, on that. You being French person, yourself a French national.
Oui, je parle français, je suis née ici et ton accent en français est très bien. C'est très bien, tu as très bien parlé.
So that was great, Parham. Your accent is wonderful. And ma'am is a French person.
Could you repeat, please, ma'am? What do you say? Could you repeat?
Yeah, people are intrigued to listen your French as well, Cécilia ma'am. If you could just put across few sentences the way you said once again.
How can we learn French, ma'am?
Avec votre
Parham,
professeur.
we'll take those questions in French later on, right? Today we'll just focus on English as a language, Parham, right? We will take it offline, don't worry.
We will do a French session. We will do a French one.
We'll do a French session for you, don't worry at all, right? Stay connected with us. Yeah, so Ajay was intrigued to listen a little bit more of French. So Ajay, we would invite you for a French session, don't worry, right? Whenever we do it, we'll update you on the same. Stay connected.
Okay,
I think we have a hand raised by Miss Mansi Singh. Yeah, Mansi, if you have something to say, please unmute.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Please.
Hello, ma'am. I hope that you are fine and doing good. Ma'am, I just have a question that, ma'am, what are some of the most notable culture differences that you have noticed between the French-speaking and the English-speaking communities?
You mean not India only? You mean really English-speaking countries on the whole, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's actually a very difficult question. Well, in terms of cultural, God, hold on, I need to think about this. God, because that's a very wide and open question. One of the fun ones that I can think of is actually the one I just did. When people are thinking about something, you want to see what you're going to say. You're thinking about what you're going to say next. In English, you're going to say In French, we say So if I were thinking in French, I would say So let me think about your question. But in terms of global changes, it's really going to be mostly, the gender of things. The gender of things that is neutral in English, that's a big one. Now, in terms of, since every country, there are so many different English-speaking countries, and they all have their different cultures. It's a little wide as a question. Perhaps in the English language, there is a little more exclamation than in the French one. French is a rather linear language. That's why I told you we don't have the tonic, we don't have the accent. There's not as much of a variation in the French language. It's rather monotonous somehow. That's why if I read a story in French, it's going to be very monotonous, very, like always the same tone. And in English, whichever country then the English is being spoken, you do have a lot of ups and downs in the speaking, which actually causes. So thank you. Now I have something. It causes, because of that intonation, it causes people to speak louder. In English, people speak louder than in French. If you take, for example, public transportation in France, it is common. It is actually, it's not mandatory, but it's part of the common rules that we all know of. You have to either whisper or speak, uh, really try not to bother the other passengers. When in English, there's so much of a stress on words that you're going to be, getting excited and speaking loudly. So if, let's say, I take a train to go to the country, to a suburb, to visit a palace or something with my American customers, you're going to see all the French people around getting super upset because they're going to be, they're so loud, they're so loud. And the same thing happens in England, it happens in India as well. And even myself, I can hear myself, I'm being very loud right now when I speak. And if I spoke French, I would be speaking with a much quieter voice. So that's one of the big challenges for the French. And the French don't understand. They go, why are they so loud? Well, it's because of that intonation that you have to put into the words.
Totally. Thank you for that response, sir. Mansi, that gives you an answer?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that answer. Ma'am, I have one
Perfect.
more question for you.
All right. We will take it up quickly, Mansi. Yeah, please.
Ma'am, what do you think in your professional experience? How important is fluency in English for career advancement in France?
Very, very. Actually, I do believe today, if you do not master English, that is a huge impediment. When I went to an English, it was really, my studies were all about English, and then later I diversed. So whether it was in pedagogy or then in history, what I do right now, but when I did that, people still did not understand the extent of speaking English. Today, it's not even a question that you're not going to master English. There's no way. There's no way, because we have such a globalization. We work in so many different places. France actually, England, of course, has a specific tie with India, but France, thanks to the good relationships our president Emmanuel Macron and Narendra Modi are sharing, we have excellent relationships with India, and we are opening up, to like working hand in hand with India and with other English-speaking countries. So to us, it is absolutely mandatory. This is the language you need to be speaking to be understood across the world. And we do intend to tighten these links, in particular with India. The French president a couple of years ago offered to multiply the amount of learning visas for coming to France. I guess maybe you had heard of this. He wanted to make it easier for Indian students to come to France for learning and so on. We have very tight ties right now that we're so happy with. And I think without this mastering of languages, we would not be able to do it. If you only stick to the one language you know, how would you broaden your space? How would you broaden your tolerance and acceptance of each other? Because in the end, when I say there are prejudice here and stereotypes here, the people who have these stereotypes, they have them because they don't understand them. And they don't understand because they don't share. If you share in a language that is common to the two of you, you're going to understand each other. We only fear what we don't understand. So understanding is really the key. I think it's the key to peace and to tolerance. So languages, to me, are the most important thing that you should master.
Beautifully said, Cecilia, ma'am. I think that really makes a lot of sense in the contemporary world, wherein the world has become a globalized village, and people have come so closer to each other to understand and to work together is the need of the hour. And the way you mentioned that when we are talking in a different language, we are altogether a different person. I think that drift, that change, that transition should be there, and that shows our adaptability. That also shows the fact that we are ready to embrace other culture very easily. I think the tolerance and the acceptance, and that leads to finally the world peace, something that is very obvious and common and has to be there every time. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that answer because it sums up largely what the mission of this whole project of Shubh Language Academy in teaching English is. So thank you for that. We'll take just one last quick question from Subhashish. I see him raise his hand. Subhashish, you have something to say?
Yeah, bonjour madame. Just one small thing that I'm from a French colony, like Chandanagar. Okay, donc that's one thing. Now I have just two very small questions, which is very related, related to the modern world of learning. First of all, the use of AI. You know, the application of AI, artificial intelligence, is used in every field. Okay. Now, do you think that if AI is introduced, I mean, do you think that it will make learning a language a bit, like not to that depth? See, many students, many children, they have the tendency of learning a language through apps like Duolingo, which has become very popular. Now, what happens is, since the app they're programmed, what I feel is they can just learn by, imitating and repeating. It's just a form of repetition rather than, like framing. So to what extent these apps or AI helpful, like advantageous as well as disadvantages in the field of learning a foreign language? That is my
That's
first.
a very good question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and another brief question is, don't you think that since AI and the translators, these are coming into existence, so the demand for learning a foreign language will fall? These are my two short questions, ma'am.
Yeah, and you're making a very good point here. I think indeed that could be one of the risks. AI makes everything so much easier, and today we tend to go towards what's easier. But the problem is that if you just go in Google Translate and you put your little text and go, okay, I'm going to answer in my own language, and Google will translate it and send it, then you're losing that curiosity, that first for languages, that first for learning in general. And I do believe, there's one thing I'm always telling myself. One day, a day when you have not learned anything at all is a wasted day. Whatever your age, wherever you are, learn one thing a day. And it is true that with artificial intelligence, maybe this is going to start decreasing. And yeah, there are so many apps that you can use, and those are good tools. They're good tools, but they're tools. You still have to learn how to use these tools, because this is very limited. I mean, obviously, I did all the Duolingo for learning Hindi, and honestly, the sessions are not very big. And you know what they taught me? On Duolingo, they teach you, they say, dog per mutt beto, belly per beto. Why? Why would I learn not to sit on the dog, but to sit on the cat? So you see, it is very limited. I think the human intervention and having teachers who besides are passionate to help you learn a language. That's what I studied. I mastered in English. Okay. But I did not master just in language. You do etymology, you do civilization, you do literature. There's just so much more to a language than using an application. So those are tools. And I would say use them because it's fun. It is fun. Use anything, as long as it's fun and it keeps your attention. But don't use them as your only means of learning, because that would be very reductive. But I'm hoping, we say in French, we say touch wood, and if we don't have any wood, we touch our heads. Say touch wood, that people will still have this curiosity for each other and for getting things from one another. Because if one day we stop, that is when we're going to become we're going to see that lack of tolerance, and that's going to be a little more complicated, I believe. But I will keep on taking people to India, and I'm sure they will want to learn.
Totally.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you, Subhashish, for that beautiful question. And I think you very rightly mentioned about the human presence, Cecilia, ma'am, that if we remove all human beings, all emotions, then what is left is it's nothing. I think that reminds me about a very quick experience I'll share. That the other day we were talking about one of the French poets, that's Pierre de Ronsard. So he's a very famous poet. He was the prince of poets, and he was very famous. And there's one of his famous poetries wherein he talks about Cahiers votre jeunesse, which is in French, Cahiers votre jeunesse, which means make most of your youth, right? This is the time, make most of it. Just put yourself onto some activity, do it in a way that you make most of it. We got onto the translator. It gives us pick your youth, which makes no sense at all. So until unless we have got human people there who are trying to give sense to what the writer wanted to say, the poet wanted to say, I think only then we could actually make sense out of all those expressions, and we can understand what these French poets wanted to say. So that's true. And since we are moving ahead towards the end of the session, I thought that we have a French person with us, and she speaks such beautiful English, of course, and she's French native, and she knows Hindi as well. So I thought let's make most of this opportunity by asking our English learners some French words that are used in English. So everyone, please just gear up, because there's a little activity for all of you, because I see many people in this group and they are not responding. So it's a chance for all of you to participate and to respond. So what I'll do is that I'll share some words, like 6-7 words, which are of a French origin, but they are found in English as well. And let's see if you know their pronunciation. Can you do their French pronunciation, which is the right one? And then we'll ask Cecilia ma'am to help us with their exact French pronunciation, and we'll also try to see their meaning. Right? So all of you, you're ready. I'll quickly share my screen. And here we go with the first word. All right.
So we agreed.
Yeah. You've agreed? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so
Yes,
if you have,
agreed.
okay, you have
Means
you
Can
do
I
that.
tell you a few French words which we use in English?
I'll be sharing my screen, and you would get to see a word, and then you would tell us the pronunciation of the same. You would raise your hands,
Okay.
and then we'll ask you, right? So we'll do it in a very democratic way, so that everyone gets a chance by raising their hands. All right. So please just don't unmute yourself unless we ask you. Okay. So I don't know if if the screen is visible. So you'll have to tell me if the screen is visible to you. The first word,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Yeah. So please,
Resume.
you'll have to raise your hands. You'll have to raise your hands.
Resume.
No, we would not do that way. We just ask. Okay. Yeah. So okay, we'll ask. Yeah, Poonam Sharma, if you could just tell us.
Resume.
All right, Cecilia, ma'am, are you okay with that pronunciation?
That is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Resume.
Resume. Yeah, that's correct. Poonam, that's correct. Resume. And if you could share the meaning, Poonam, if you know, perhaps.
Yes, resume, CV.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So when you apply for a job and you have to put across your resume, it talks about your professional journey. True. Okay, perfect. We'll take the next word, and let's see. We'll give chance to everyone. Next word, if it's visible to you all, who would be responding? So we have Arun. I'm sorry. The name is Arna. Is that so? Arna? Yeah. Please
Yeah.
unmute. Yeah. Great.
it's deja vu.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. And what do you mean by that, Arna? If you could give us some meaning of it.
Like, I don't know.
Okay, you
Can,
don't know the meaning.
can
Okay.
I tell you the meaning?
Okay, we'll check with Cecilia ma'am once, and then maybe, or we open it up to anyone. Yeah, Dr. Poonam, you would like to respond to that?
Yes.
The meaning? Yeah.
Yes. The thing which we already experienced, or which for which we have an idea.
Exactly. That's true. Which is something that you've already seen. Ma'am, if you can just help us, Cecilia ma'am, with the pronunciation part of it once again.
Déjà vu.
Deja vu. Yeah, that's correct. Deja vu. So I think, Arna, it's vu in the end and not vu. So deja vu. Perfect. All right. I see everyone being very active for this activity. Great. All right. So the next one, please raise your hands. We have Surendra Kumar. So I know that's Riddhi. Riddhi, please unmute your. Are you up for this word, Riddhi?
Chauffeur.
All right. A little more try once again, if you could just try.
Chauffeur.
Okay. We'll
Can I?
we'll ask someone else. We'll ask Gayatri Malhotra once. Let's see.
Chauffeur.
Okay. Yeah, Cecilia ma'am, over to you.
Chauffeur.
Chauffeur. And if you could, anyone for the meaning, what could that mean? We'll ask Riddhi.
Driver.
Riddhi.
Qui conduit
Yeah.
la voiture.
A
Oh là là,
chauffeur
qui conduit là.
whose
Okay.
job is to drive somebody else.
Yeah, that's true. A personal driver, right? That's true. Okay, great. All right, we'll move ahead with the next word. I'm sure you know this word. Please raise your hands, and we'll see. We'll give a chance to someone who has not yet spoken. Okay, we'll ask Shubhashish. Yeah, Shubhashish.
It's entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur. Okay, and any meaning for that, Shubhashish? If you can help us with the meaning.
Entrepreneur basically is a person who starts a business. Like we have
Perfect.
Tatas and Wheelers. They are good examples of entrepreneur. The language.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Great. We'll move to the next word. And anyone, please raise your hands. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. So we have Parham. Parham. Yeah, please go ahead.
Clique,
Okay. Once again, could you retry, Parham?
clique,
Okay, a good try. We'll check with someone else again. We'll ask Arna. Arna, if you can help us with the pronunciation of this word.
No.
No? Okay. Who else? Yeah.
I'll try. I'll try.
Yeah, please do.
Sisla.
Okay, that was quite distant from what the pronunciation is. So we'll check with our expert, Cecilia, ma'am, if you can help us with that.
Cliché.
Cliche. Right, cliche. And ma'am, if you could explain the meaning of this word, cliche.
It is when something is very stereotypical.
Exactly, something very, very stereotypical or something very redundant. Yeah, so you very obvious, right? Very cliche. Okay, perfect. And we'll move quickly. We are still left with two more words. This one I'm sure you must have seen a lot. Okay, okay, we have got just Poonam and Gayatri, so we'll ask Poonam first. Yeah, Poonam, if you could help us with this word.
Yes, rendezvous.
Rendezvous, rendezvous. And Poonam, if you could let us know the meaning of this word, rendezvous.
Yeah, there are two meanings,
All right.
appointment or meeting.
Okay, an appointment or a meeting. All right, perfect. Rendezvous. Ma'am, you're okay with that, Cecilia, ma'am?
I am completely okay with that.
Great. Oh, we see the enthusiasm in our learners and the way they are picking up these words. Great. And to finish it up, we have one last word that I'm sharing across on the screen. Please raise your hands. So we'll ask. Okay, we have. Okay, let me just quickly ask Gayatri for that. Gayatri Malhotra, please.
Bon voyage.
Voila, bon voyage. And what can that mean, Gayatri, for you? Any
Happy journey.
happy journey. Great. So I think with that we have come to the end of our session, and I wish bon voyage, especially in the sense of your learning of languages, that you have a happy journey, that you learn well, bon apprentissage. And we are really thankful to you, Cecilia ma'am, for your kind presence. Such interactive session, so insightful, and a lot of exchanges that took place. And we are really fond of all the things that you have shared with us, and especially the connect that you have with India, Indians, and the Hindi language, and of course the aspects that you brought from the English-speaking country as well. And the fact that we cannot forget that the way you talked about the Indo-French ties and the linkages that which are getting stronger and stronger day by day. Thank you very much for that. And I thank all the participants that you were a part of this whole session and that you were very active all throughout. Best wishes for your learning of English language. And we'll catch up next week with a new expert. With that, we are signing off. And I wish you all a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am, once again.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Cecilia.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bonjour, madame.
Enchanté. Enchanté, madame.